Good morning. So, this morning I want to talk about reading people and how people will always tell you who they are. Um, if you learn how to read in between the lines, people are always telling you exactly who they are and what you can expect from them. And they're doing this in a way that is subconscious. So, they're projecting outwardly their perspective on life and they're projecting it onto you, they're projecting it onto their situations, they're projecting it by the choice of words that they are choosing to use. See, the thing is that we get all caught up. We get all caught up in our own internal world. So most of the time in a lot of our interactions, unless we train ourselves how to start coming out of ourselves and being a perceiver as we are also going through our life, it's like being also the observer, but also being from the other point of perspective as the person who is going through the thing. What is it called? My words. So you are the observer. So that's your one point of looking at it. And you are also the experiencer. So a lot of times we get stuck in being the experiencer and we get stuck in what is that person saying to me, me, me. The ego is the experiencer, the person that thinks that this body and this experience and this life is me. And then there is the higher self, which is the observer, which is like, oh, the one that analyzes, the one that typically comes in at night and says, oh, you should have said that. And wait a minute, what about this? Not exactly, because that's also kind of the ego, but the one that comes in at night and makes the overall assessment of what happened in the day. Why did that interaction happen that way? So when you become the observer and the experiencer at the same time, you can be completely present in the moment with the other person or with the interaction or with whatever, with your life, but you can also observe it from a higher point advantage or a higher point of view, and you can kind of see what's going on, and it's kind of removing yourself emotionally from the situation so that you can see it objectively and make judgments accordingly in every moment so that you can guide your life in the way that you want to guide it. So you become less reactionary and more intentional in your life. So a lot of times, see, that is the life work, to be able to manage your emotions to a point that you don't get swept away by others' emotions. Especially if you're an empath, this is a tool that you really have to learn how to use, so that you're not swept away in other people's emotions. Because as an empath, I did a video about empaths. You can watch that. Knowing your powers. Um, but as an empath, you can easily get swept away in others' emotions because you can feel their emotions. So once you take control of your power, you can still feel their emotions, but you can also disconnect in a way that you can become the observer and you can be an objective participant as well as the experiencer in your life. And so what happens a lot of times is that we get carried away in the conversation with this other person or the situation. We get carried away and it starts moving us emotionally and we start reacting. We get into this reactionary um, way of being. And when you can remove yourself from just being the reactionary and taking everything personally and you become this observer and you start watching, you can tell, you can see that other people are always telling you exactly where they are on their spiritual path, on their spiritual journey. They're always telling you their perspective through the choice of words that they have, through the way that they're conceiving the situation, through what they are projecting onto you, per what their judgments are. And people will always tell you who they are when you learn how to read in between the lines, and when you learn how to read this higher language. It's like an art. People will always tell you through their projections of the future, through their projections of what is happening right now, exactly where their mindset is and what their perspective is and what kind of filters they are using And then it really it gives you an advantage point, to first of all not take things personally. Second of all, to take things as they are, kind of like take things flat. And it also gives you a an advantage to help yourself in the situation, help yourself guide yourself through the situation because you know who you're dealing with. Let's say in business, if you see that the other person is, even if they don't know, see, the thing is a lot of times that the other person isn't aware of their own perspective. There's a various levels of awareness, throughout humanity, and most of the people that you meet are in very low self-awareness. And this is, I'm not saying this in a way well, it is a judgment, but I'm not saying it in a way of like judging people. I'm just saying it in a way of observation, because when you get to the higher levels of consciousness, just as an observation, just saying it flatly out, in order to see something, you have to be able to just say it like it is. Um, when you get to the higher levels of consciousness, the higher that you rise, the more you can see. It's like climbing to a tall mountain, and you're able to see way more than if you're in the valley. If you're in the valley, you might only be able to see the stones at the bottom of the valley. When you rise to the top of the mountain, you can see the valley, you can see the stones on the valley, you can see the other hills. I just show you where I'm at. This is all, this is why this is all coming up. You see, I'm sitting right here. I have a really wonderful vantage point from where I am. There's still rising. There's always going to be rising, and always going to be, where to go. But you see, this is something that, I'll tell a little story about it. When See, it's kind of personal, but I'll put it in here anyway, because it was when I learned this, about uh, when I first noticed this. Um, I was going through a divorce, and I had just started out on my spiritual journey, and I was going to therapy, and I was speaking out all of the things that were going on, and I started speaking out everything that I was going through, and I started noticing that um, everything that my ex-husband was doing, he was projecting on me as me doing it too. And I started like looking in the mirror, and I could see that everything that he was planning, or everything that he was going to do, he was telling me up front. And I started realizing that it is because, well, first of all, there's also the mirror effect there, but I'm not going to get into that. It wasn't a perfect mirror effect, but it was a projection of when somebody is in a mindset, and somebody, let's say if somebody has a mindset and a perception of, you have to go out and you have to fight in the world to get what you want, or I have to hold somebody else down in order to achieve something in myself, um, then they are going to expect that behavior from others. They are going to see that behavior in other people's actions, whether the other person is doing that or not doing that. And that is what I mean about reading in between the lines. If somebody is cutthroat, that is what they're going to see in the world, and that is what they're going to expect to get back. So if somebody is talking about how they're even talking about opponents, that means that they're in a fight in the world. Or if somebody's talking about this other, whatever they're saying about other people is what they would actually be doing in themselves. If somebody perceives the world as constantly ripping them off, or constantly um, um, bad things coming to them, that is because they would, in that same situation, do that same thing. Whereas if somebody sees the world as a loving place, and how they're accepted in the world, and how everything is joyous, then that is what they are also projecting out into the world, and that is why that is what they are expecting to see back from the world. So when you really listen and you read in between the lines, people will tell you what their perspective is. People will tell you what their personality is. People will tell you where they are and what they think without them even knowing. And when we're able to not get all caught up, because when we're caught up, we're trying to prove our own point. We're in every situation, we're trying to push ourselves out. We're trying to say, we're trying to get the other person to listen to us, get the other person to listen to us. Whereas if we just be quiet for a minute and let the other person fill the gaps, a lot of times when there's an empty space, people will try to fill that empty space. And if you allow the other person in the conversation to fill that empty space, first of all, they will feel like they are um, being listened to. So they feel like they are getting attention. I met somebody a couple weeks ago, and they were just talking and talking and talking and talking. And every once in a while, I would say, "Mm-hmm, yeah, mm-hmm." And at the end of the conversation, the person really liked me. And I said, "I love this conversation. It's so nice to talk to you and to know you." And I was thinking to myself, that people want to be heard and people want somebody else to listen. And if you listen, they feel close to you, whether they know you or not. So I didn't really tell this person anything about me, and they felt really close to me by the end of the conversation because they knew that I knew a lot about them. So a lot of times, if you're just quiet and you allow the other person to fill the void, first of all, you will get a far more information. What you already know, you already know. So it's just like re-saying things that you already know. You're not getting any added value. Think whatever the other person knows, you don't know yet. So a lot of times, if you just allow a void to be there, the other person will fill that void, and through their conversation, you'll first of all learn a lot about them. Second of all, they will feel like they trust you and that they can confide in you. And at the end, they'll feel like you know them and that you have a kinship. And also they will tell you who they are when you really sit back and you don't have that push or that drive to try to prove yourself to them. Then you have the ability to kind of stand back and assess and watch the situation. So if you really listen to people, they will always tell you exactly who they are.